So we have now, again, introduction of ordinances on first reading. Councilmember Bonagordo, the ordinance number 1907, repeal small unmanned aircraft ordinance. We have a resolution of introduction.
So could we discuss this beforehand, or we have to read it first?
I think I have to read it first.
I think it
No?
would be appropriate to read it.
Yeah, I think I have to read it
Okay.
first.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you got the introduction.
First, we need a second.
Second.
Okay. Ordinance 1907, an ordinance repealing Chapter 137, Small Unmanned Aircraft of the Code of the Borough of Franklin Lakes.
Whereas ordinance 1907 was introduced at the meeting of the mayor and council held on the 18th day of April 2023. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the Borough of Franklin Lakes, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey, that ordinance 1907 be and the same is hereby introduced on the first reading. And be it further resolved that said ordinance 1907 will be further considered for final passage at a meeting of the mayor and council to be held on the 16th day of May 2023 at 7:30 p.m. in the evening or as soon thereafter, as the matter can be reached the council chambers of Borough Hall, 480 Court Drive, Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, at which time and place all persons who may be interested in be given an opportunity to be heard regarding this ordinance 1907. And be it finally resolved that the borough clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish information and notice of hearing as required by law.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
We have discussion.
Yes. So, I obviously goes to Bill. Greg and I spoke about this today, and the concern here is, and I know Joel mentioned this concern also, but if we repeal this, we're saying that then these drones could fly over private property and spy on us if they'd like, no matter who it is.
We're saying we're conceding the fact that the FAA and the federal government is taking control of all of these drones. As you can imagine, each municipality has a different idea of what should be allowed and shouldn't be allowed, and the powers that be decided it would be better handled at the state and federal level rather than have each municipality establish its own rules regarding air flight of this type of vehicle.
And the state and federal laws say that it's allowed to go over private property and spy on us individually. I don't care about public property, but private property.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're allowed to travel above your property and do whatever, they're doing it now.
How is that legitimate? I don't get
If
it.
I can comment a little bit on that too. I took a look at some of the federal regulations, and they're very comprehensive. So that's one of the distinctions. One of the reasons it's preempted is because they regulate these aircraft in so many different ways. We had a email from somebody, I don't know if it's a resident or not, probably not, who knows, and they were summarizing why our ordinance, other than the fact it's just preempted, I mean that's the simple part, that's the simple explanation, but they were suggesting that for example, that night flight is also legal operation. Not so simple. There's a regulation that says no person may operate a small. Well, I'm sorry. Except as provided in paragraph D, no person may operate a small unmanned aircraft system at night unless, and then it has requirements. So they're very involved regulations. Or another one is operation over human beings, because we have a provision over any persons not directly participating in the operation of the aircraft. It says no person may operate a small unmanned aircraft over a human being unless, and then it has a number of conditions. So they're much more, so your question, it's not quite that simple. I agree that my understanding is that yes, they can fly over a private residence. You said spy. I'm sure they are not permitted to spy on people.
What are they doing up there with it? I mean, the question is what's going on?
But
and what would a resident
the point
have
of the
recourse?
ordinance, of course, is that we have no ability to regulate this area of law, and there are very comprehensive regulations. And as we talked about today, it may be important for us to understand maybe better, get a summary of these regulations or something along those lines, but they are what they are, and we don't have the authority to
Greg, this, no, this, and as Bill was saying, this is a very broad preemption. They haven't reserved any powers to local governments at all.
Absolutely not.
Zero.
Right,
Nothing.
absolutely
No
not.
cutouts, no exculpatory clauses.
And if you
nothing,
read the
no.
regulations, you'd understand why. These are comprehensive. There's no.
It's not realistic to have each municipality with
Yeah.
its own set of regulations
Right.
and
So we have no recourse as a resident?
But let me get to your point, but if a drone comes over a private property and hovers at the window and is looking in, don't we have some privacy laws that will I mean, they can't just do that willy-nilly, right?
Well, I assume that I'm not that familiar with the federal regulations, but it would seem to me that there are restrictions against
I
that.
mean, we have peeping Tom laws, right? So doesn't that fall under that? I mean,
Well, I'd have to take a look at the peeping Tom laws and see whether or not it does, but, yeah, you make a good point, but whether or not these concerns are covered by the federal regulations, we'd have to look into it. But the bottom line is, we can't set up our own set of regulations to control these vehicles.
But right now, we have it. We have an ordinance that
We have an
prohibits
ordinance
this.
but we can't enforce it, because an attorney would walk into municipal court and say, it's preempted, and the judge would have to throw it out.
And who was the individual that sent this email?
It
And-
sounds like-
And what's their
I
vested
tried
interest in this?
finding
Well,
What's-
their vested interest
That's
is
what
in
I
the
wanna know.
drone business.
Right.
Well, it's probably a lobbyist,
Right.
but it doesn't matter. Well, he sends us the letter. I took a look at the federal statutes and examined it, and it appears that he's right. It is preempted, and we could ignore him, but then we have an ordinance on the books that somebody's gonna feel obligated to enforce. They're gonna spend time enforcing it, come into court, and it's gonna be thrown out.
So we have no recourse here whatsoever.
Well, I mean, if there's a particular activity that, we can take a look at the federal regulations and make sure that they're enforced in town, but we have to go with the federal regulations rather than having our own ordinance.
And so, like I said, I think it's important that we understand maybe fully there's probably even experts in this area that could that maybe don't have a vested interest that could speak to a summary of the regulations, or there's probably articles on it and things like that
I'm sure
too.
there's many
I spent
detailed-
about a half hour, looking at the federal regulations.
think-
I spend more than, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
detailed analysis and
Yeah.
a breakdown and a summary of what they are that we can provide to.
Yeah.
And I just saw something, it's a relatively new statute, the federal I'm talking about, but there might be some existing case law that's come down
Yeah, but
that might
it's-
balance the privacy issues and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
And we could look into that,
But-
or the
but-
regs that enable the statute.
The bottom line, if I may, as Bill is saying, is that we're preempted. So this ordinance is of no force or effect.
Right.
Right.
So we should repeal it. If you have an ordinance on the books that's of no force or effect, you should repeal it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so,
Yeah. Shoot it. Shoot it.
So I'll work on seeing if we can, put together some sort of summary of the federal regulations.
People have shot those down and gotten in trouble for doing it too. When it was over their property. Not saying in this town, but when they're over people's houses,
Yeah,
people
I
shot them
read that
down
in
and,
case.
and they, destruction of property, this, that, whatever, and get sued, whatever, it's,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
yes, I know.
I'd love to know more about the federal. What they're allowing
We'll
and not
do
allowing.
that.
But there might be case law on it too, which I think would be
We'll
interesting.
do that. We'll get some more information.
So at this stage of the game, bottom line is, there's no point even having this. We have to repeal it,
Yeah.
and because of federal law.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is terrible.
Okay,
All right.
so, roll call?
Councilman Ansch,
yes.
Council President Bonagora,
Yes.
Councilwoman Cardenas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Councilman Lambricks,
Yes.
Councilman Shepherd.
Yes.
All right, thank you.